As the president has discovered, being a disruptor has its personal downsides. Whether it's the border wall or troop withdrawals from Syria and Afghanistan, the swamp is committed to holding him back. The antagonism he continues to face from his political opponents is vicious. But as we saw last night, when they are calmly confronted with clarity, they're often flummoxed. Trump has co-opted some of their big issues, like fair trade, criminal justice reform, in opposition to endless military interventionism. Now, last night, Trump, though, tried to find some common cause.
We must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. We can bridge old divisions, heal old wounds, build new coalitions, forge new solutions, and unlock the extraordinary promise of America's future.
Nancy Pelosi's smirk notwithstanding, last night the president did something few expected. He attempted to unify the country. He was even magnanimous toward his most hostile critics, giving the Ghost Gals, the throng of white-suited lefties, their due.
Don't sit yet. You're going to like this. We also have more women serving in Congress than at any time before.
The president accomplished something there that his enemies may have missed there. Now, while they were clearly chanting USA as a celebration of themselves, Trump got them to take up the refrain usually reserved for, his rallies. Now, for a moment, even the Democrats experienced what so many Americans around the country have experienced at a Trump rally, a sense of vibrant community, a patriotic chanting together, not something nasty, but something positive, our country. But the good feelings didn't last too long. NPR repaid the president's magnanimity with a phony fact check, where they insisted that the number of women in Congress was, quote, almost entirely because of Democrats, not Trump's party. Speaker Pelosi attempted to make the same insipid point.
He forgot to acknowledge that there are only 15 Republicans and 91 Democratic women in the Congress of the United States. It was like weird you're bringing this up.
Now, this is a woman who looked like she was reading a menu at a Chinese restaurant during the speech, and she's saying that was weird. The president never said we have more Republican women serving in Congress than any time before. He only saluted the fact that there were more women serving. I guess some people can't even take a compliment. But it doesn't matter, I think, because the American people saw the president trying to reach out. They also saw a side of him that often gets lost. The caring, grandfatherly, and yes, even tender side of Donald Trump.
Joining Melania in the gallery this evening is a very brave 10-year-old girl, Grace Eline. Every birthday,
he saluted our World War II veterans, Holocaust survivors, and Buzz Aldrin. Now, it was a thoroughly American evening where people felt good about the country, and I think just the average person, not the jaded people in Washington, L.A., and New York, but the regular folks, they just reveled in seeing our heroes from decades ago and even some new ones. Once or twice, the president even managed to get both sides of the aisle to rise in support of a legislative agenda and an item that some people laughed at a year ago, including Paul Ryan, paid family leave. Look at Chuck Schumer even jumping to his feet.
I'm also proud to be the first president to include in my budget a plan for nationwide paid family leave.
Now, when it was over, I think the left was kind of grasping for something, anything. Please help them. Give them something to criticize.
That the President of the United States at this moment in the world did not mention climate change in even a sentence is just, frankly, a disgrace.
There were soldiers who were transgender who have been thrown out of the military. He didn't mention them.
This is the same speech Donald Trump always gives.
This is an angry, racist, platform that has been surrounded by sweet stories and World War II veterans.
Oh, my God. I mean, they sounded so ridiculous. Like sex trafficking and criminal justice reform. I mean, we're going to get into this. But that is just dishonest. It's ridiculous for them to say that. What the State of the Union did was remind the American people of how much good the president has done over the last 2 years. Not perfect, but he's done a lot of good things, not only economically either. It's not what I'm talking about. Also on foreign policy, which he's derided for by the smart set over at MSNBC, and also for the cause of life, the most vulnerable among us. The speech vividly revealed the contrast between his vibrant policies that are very clear and the pale, colorless agenda of the left. Now, they're now the party of what? Think about the left, the Democrats. Infanticide, open borders, drug legalization, racializing politics. Everybody's a racist, right? Banning cars, the green agenda, and, for some, socialism.
What's your view of your party's drift, not entirely, but in many prominent members, towards socialism?
I wouldn't quite call it socialism. There are others who want to leave a little more to the private sector.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that all of us believe that when you look at the State of the Union on the economy, it's not good for middle-class families. And so, you know, you have to focus on what's really happening here, and the president is just not doing that.
It's a softer version of socialism, Schumer style. Well, the president may not have united Congress last night, but he unified many, I think, out there watching, the American people, by kind of pulling off the mask of some of these naysayers, the negativity purveyors, the Democratic Party today, during that speech. And it was kind of long. People were saying it was too long, but I got a text from people saying they wanted it to go on longer. They loved the stories and they loved the hope in that speech. And I think many saw, perhaps for the first time, the reality of what the left represents and how opposed they are to the common sense, good policies that Trump has brought to Washington. The petulance and the nastiness that Democrats displayed last night, I think, is going to be remembered well into 2020. So will Donald Trump's confident kindness. But don't worry. The Dems were hard at work trying to repair their reputations today. As the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, chalked up a big win for his party. He eliminated the "so help me God" line from the hearing swearing in until, well, a Republican colleague insisted that he put it back in. Heck of a job, Jerry. You go knock yourself out. You're just trying to eat away at the fabric of America. I think most of the country would rather celebrate our traditions as Donald Trump did last night. And that's the angle.
Here now with more, Jill Abramson, former executive editor of the New York Times and author of the new book, Merchants of Truth, The Business of News and the Fight for Facts. Jill, good to have you with us tonight. You see all those comparisons and the fact-checking that goes on. And sometimes some of those fact-checks do lead themselves into some curious territory. What do you make of those comparisons?
Well, I think that the job of fact-checking in real time, which is what the fact-checking for the State of the Union was, is difficult, and some of it may seem, too exacting or nitpicking. But, he did make several errors in the speech, including his claim that there are more women in the workforce than at any point in history. So, I think some of it was...
But that moment, for instance, when he was talking about the more women in the workforce who are members of Congress, and he sort of, applauded them and said, good for you. And then the instant reaction is, well, there's irony there because many of them were elected because they were running against President Trump, but he was still magnanimous in that moment. I don't think he was suggesting that they were there because of him.
Yes, no, I don't either. And I think most of the coverage that I read about the women in white and the record numbers didn't have the kind of angle that the NPR.
I also want to get your thoughts on this because yesterday I went to the anchor luncheon before the State of the Union at the White House, we were all told it's a tradition that it's off the record.
Right.
And there were even moments at the end of the luncheon when people raised questions. You know, would it be okay if this item is on the record, Mr. President? And it was decided unanimously that the whole lunch was going to be off the record. And then this piece surfaces in the New York Times and then other places that details things that were said in there. Joe Biden is dumb, the president said. He called Schumer a nasty son of a bitch. All of this stuff starts coming out. But it never mentions in this story that there was an agreement that this lunch would be off the record. What do you think about that?
Well, the Times wasn't part of the lunch. They weren't part of the pledge to keep it confidential. And, you know, some of those remarks, I think, were destined to leak and maybe wanted to be leaked, even with, you know, the agreement that the lunch was.
Do you think it should be mentioned in the story that the lunch, that it's traditionally off the record, or you think it's fine for there to be no mention of that?
Well, for transparency, you know, I think it would have been good to mention it, but I don't think the Times transgressed in any way.
All right. You're doing a book tour, and your book is called Merchants of Truth, which we just mentioned in the intro. I want to ask you about this. It's just surfacing on Twitter. There are some suggestions that some parts of the book could be plagiarized, that they are matched to other writing that is very close in its wording here. Michael Moynihan of Vice is writing about this. He goes to a section that Jake Mullooly wrote in Vice Cop that talks about Jason Mojica. And the paragraphs are very similar in your writing. Do you have any comment on this? There's another one, Lizzie Wildcom, the bad boy brand. I mean, you're going to be asked to respond to this at some point, and I'll put them right in front of you.
You know, all I can tell you
is,
you know, I certainly didn't plagiarize in my book. And, you know, there are 70 pages of footnotes showing, you know, where I got the information.
So do you think that it's possible that some of these are just not, they're incorrectly footnoted, perhaps? This one, Lizzie Whitcomb, the bad boy brand, the New Yorker, talks about Shorinsky told Wired that he doesn't remember reading the article and that his investment was a few $100,000. And then the next paragraph from your book is essentially the same. Do you think this is a footnote issue?
No, I don't think it's an issue at all.
So you're standing by your work 100%, and
yes.
I mean, I ask you because he's been going on, I guess, for the past 20
minutes.
Well,
many people from Vice have been taking issue with the book, it seems, you know.
And why is that?
I think they don't like the portrayal of Vice, although I think it's a very balanced portrait, and I have a lot of praise for some of their journalists and some of their stories. I like their fresh approach to news.
So you're on the record as saying that there's absolutely nothing in here that you have any problem with, and you'll take a look at them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one last question before I let you go about covering President Trump in general, because you have said that you think the New York Times is sometimes biased in their coverage of the president. And, you know, when you talk to the people in the communications department at the White House, and not just talking about the New York Times, but they feel like there's such a broad brush that they basically can't get out from under every single day. There's so much negative coverage of the president. And you look at the right track, wrong track numbers, and most of America seems to be very happy with, you know, the economy and foreign policy in general, and yet they think the country's on the wrong track. And some say that's because the message that they get all the time from much of the media is so dark. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I don't think the media is why there's that discrepancy. And I do think on some days there are too many stories on the Mueller probe or about allegations or negative appraisals of the president's agenda. And I think, you know, they're all well reported and factual, but, you know, when you have many at once, and some of the headlines will needlessly throw him in. And partly it's because anytime you have a story on Trump, you get a big audience, lots of clicks. And the president has been ratings bonanza, especially for cable channels. You know that.
That is true. He's the story. There's no doubt about it.
He is the story.
Jill Abramson, Merchants of Truth, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to have you here tonight. Thank you.